Hi guys, I am here again with the book Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt, and I am going to read chapter 1 today. There were some comments on my YouTube page before I start that some people were having some trouble with the audio and maybe the volume level, so I have some suggestions. There are a couple different areas that you need to check your volume level. First of all, on the actual YouTube video, if you hover over the video with your cursor, you'll notice that there is a volume toggle right on the video. Make sure you're turning that all the way up or to a level where you can hear. Also, on the actual device that you're listening on, whether that be a Chromebook or a laptop or even a phone, it doesn't really matter, whatever device it is, make sure the volume is all the way up on whatever toggle switch you have for your device as well. So you have to go to a couple different places to actually check the volume. All right, so chapter 1. If you're in the book, it is page 5. Chapter 1. The road that led to Tree Gap had been trod out long before by a herd of cows who were, to say the least, relaxed. It wandered along in curves and easy angles, swayed off and up in a pleasant tangent to the top of a small hill, ambled down again between fringes of bee-hung clover, and then cut sideways across a meadow. Here, its edges blurred. It widened and seemed to pause, suggesting tranquil bovine picnics, slow chewing and thoughtful contemplation of the infinite. And then it went on again and came at last to the woods. But on reaching the shadows of the first trees, it veered sharply, swung out in a wide arc as if, for the first time, it had reason to think where it was going and passed around it. On the other side of the woods, the sense of easiness dissolved. The road no longer belonged to the cows. It became instead, and rather abruptly, the property of people. And all at once the sun was uncomfortably hot, and the dust oppressive, and the meager grass along its edges somewhat ragged and forlorn. On the left stood the first house, a square and solid cottage with a touch-me-not appearance, surrounded by grass cut painfully to the quick, and enclosed by a capable iron fence some 4 feet high, which clearly said, "Move on, we don't want you here." So the road went humbly by and made its way, past cottages more and more frequent, but less and less forbidding, into the village. But the village doesn't matter, except for the jailhouse and the gallows. The first house only is important. The first house, the road, and the woods. There was something strange about the woods. If the look of the first house suggested that you'd better pass it by, so did the look of the woods, but for quite a different reason. The house was so proud of itself that you wanted to make a lot of noise as you passed, and maybe even throw a rock or two. But the woods had a sleepy, otherworld appearance that made you want to speak in whispers. This, at least, is what the cows must have thought. Let it keep its peace. We won't disturb it. Now, whether the people felt that way about the woods or not is difficult to say. There were some, perhaps, who did, but for the most part, the people followed the road around the woods because, well, that was the way it led. There was no road through the woods. And anyway, for the people, there was another reason to leave the woods to itself. It belonged to the Fosters, the owners of the Touch-Me-Not cottage, and was therefore private property in spite of the fact that it lay outside their fence and was perfectly accessible. The ownership of land is an odd thing when you come to think of it. How deep, after all, can it go? If a person owns a piece of land, does he own it all the way down in ever-narrowing dimensions until it meets all other pieces at the center of the earth? Or does ownership consist only of a thin crust under which the friendly worms had never heard of trespassing. In any case, the woods, being on top, except of course for its roots, was owned bud and bough by the Fosters in the Touch-Me-Not cottage. And if they never went there, if they never wandered in among the trees, well, that was their affair. Winnie, the only child of that house, she never went there, though she sometimes stood inside her fence, carelessly banging a stick against the iron bars and looked at it. But she had never been curious about it. Nothing ever seems interesting when it belongs to you, only when it doesn't. And what is interesting anyway about a slim few acres of trees? There will be a dimness shot through with bars of sunlight, a great many squirrels and birds, a deep, damp mattress of leaves on the ground, and all the other things just as familiar, if not so pleasant. Things like spiders and thorns and grubs. In the end, however, it was the cows who were responsible for the wood's isolation. And the cows, through some wisdom they were not wise enough to know that they possessed, were very wise indeed. If they had made their road through the woods instead of around it, well, then the people would have followed the road, and then the people would have noticed the giant ash tree at the center of the woods, and then in time, they would have noticed the little spring bubbling up among its roots, in spite of the pebbles that were piled there to conceal it. And that would have been a disaster so immense that this weary old earth, owned or not to its fiery core, would have trembled on its axis like a beetle on a pin. So that is the end of chapter 1. So they're trying to paint you a picture of what this area looks like and trying to make you understand that the woods is very important, and the woods is actually owned by the Fosters, who live outside of the woods, just outside of it, and have a really nice, neat little cottage that they have a big iron fence around. So, I have one question for you to ponder. And my question is, why do you think that the cows were considered to be so wise? That's it for today. Hope you enjoyed chapter 1.